What's up, fellas? Making another YouTube video. I got myself a tripod, if you couldn't tell from the fact that my phone is not propped up on a water bottle. So that's kind of cool. So the angle should be a little bit better. And then I manned up and I ordered a camera. It's going to be better than my iPhone, obviously. Cost a decent amount of money, at least to me, which anyone who knows me knows I'm cheap, so it really hurt my soul to spend that money, but hopefully it improves the quality of the videos and you guys appreciate that. Yeah, getting into the video, I want to just make a quick video today on something that I am familiar with. What am I familiar with? The only thing I'm familiar with is strength training. I would say that I'm also fairly familiar with hypertrophy training, and like I've talked about many times, effective strength training involves training different rep ranges with time. If your goal is primarily hypertrophy focused, I think this video still holds a reasonable amount of merit. You're just going to be varying your rep ranges a little bit less. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about how to get a strong, big chest. Right? So obviously the differentiation there is if you want just a big chest, generally speaking, I just don't advise dropping below 6 reps. The literature kind of supports the idea that we're going to get a similar-ish amount of hypertrophy out of any set above 5 or so reps. But that being said, it's usually just a little easier on the soft tissue. Just easier to recover from and fit in the volumes we need to grow. Kind of training in that 6 to 12 range. I think some exercises lend themselves going all the way up to 20 for some metabolite-based work, because we know that metabolite buildup in the muscles is an independent driver of hypertrophy. But for most stuff, sticking in that 6 to 12 range is money. But if you're interested in strength, you can have phases in that kind of 8 to 12 range. You're going to have phases in that kind of 4 to 6 range. And depending on the motion, you're probably going to have phases in the 1 to 3 range. Some motions don't really lend themselves to that. Some do. But we're going to break down how I think you should get a strong chest. Right, so first and foremost, the basic strength training exercise for the chest is the bench press. I believe that if you are doing strength training and you're performing the bench press, you should be using a moderate arch. I think that by turning the press into a slight decline, we're using stronger musculature. We're biasing it away from the shoulders into the pecs a little bit. Potentially, we're pressing it a little bit safer angle, maybe keeps the shoulders a little bit healthier. You could debate that and say, oh, you're going to adapt to any position you load. Generally speaking, I think it's a little easier to keep your shoulders healthy if the press is a bit of a decline. So we're going to bench with a bit of an arch, a very tight back, and a moderate width grip if we're going for maximally strengthening the chest. Maybe we bench with a wider grip if we are looking to move the max load possible, but for general strength training, I think somewhere in the middle is usually best for most people, at least as a starting point, right? That is the foundation. We want to be doing enough bench pressing enough times a week that each week we get a little bit stronger until we're more advanced. Then we have to vary things a little bit, but we wanted to be doing enough benching. That's all we could do and we get stronger. That is the foundation of how to build a big, strong chest. Mostly strong, right? You don't need to barbell bench for any goal, right? And you can get stronger using any motion, but these are the motions that I believe in. So that's going to be the first and foremost one. Bench needs to be in your routine, more than likely at least twice a week, maybe 3 times, depending on your recovery capabilities, how you're built, and how efficient your technique is. The second thing we would get into that I believe is a staple of getting a strong chest is some sort of flat pressing motion with an extended range of motion. So what can we do this with? If you have a Duffalo bar, if you have a Buffalo bar, one of those curved bars, extends the range of motion slightly. If you have a bench cambered bar, it's just a cambered bar with a very small camber in the center. That way you can bring it down, almost like a deficit bench press. That works really well. Most people don't have these options, and that's where I use my most commonly prescribed exercise, which is going to be a neutral or a 45-degree grip dumbbell bench. That way, when we bring them down, if we're using large dumbbells as we get stronger, if we had them parallel, they're going to stop at a point that's actually higher than the range of motion we're able to achieve with a straight bar. That's not filling the purpose we want. Yes, we're going to challenge the chest. Yes, we're going to challenge our stability more than we do on a barbell, but we also want to extend the range of motion and train the pecs through a greater range of motion, especially if we're using an arch in the competition bench. We kind of want to hit that range of motion that we're cutting out with the arch. So by turning the dumbbells, really pulling them into ourselves at the bottom, still keeping the back tight, still arching, but by drawing the dumbbells into us and turning them out of the way, we're going to be able to go lower than we are with a straight bar. That is a foundational movement as far as I'm concerned, as far as developing pec strength. So that's going to be a big one. I think those are my big two. If you're only going to pick two and you just want a strong chest, I would say that full range of motion dumbbell press and regular bench press would be my top two. We're going to get into some maybe less necessary ones. If a chest is a lagging body part as far as strength or size, maybe you can work these in there. The next one is going to be a full range of motion dip, so long as you've built into it slowly, your shoulders tolerate it, your elbows tolerate it, doing a really deep dip, kind of leaning forward a little bit more, keeping the eyes down, making it a little bit more of a chest dominant dip rather than a tricep dominant dip, as I kind of program those two things as different exercises. I think those would also be a foundational motion, so long as people tolerate it. A lot of people can't get away from those. That's okay, right? But that would be my third motion of choice. And then my final motion, if I were to pick for a comprehensive chest training routine, is either going to be some sort of press on an incline if your shoulders tolerate it well, or some sort of pec fly where we're training the pec through a really extended range of motion, much greater than what we would ever expose it to on a press. So that can be on the pec deck, that can be with dumbbells. I find most people like the strength curve on the pec deck a little bit more, but as long as we're really pinching the shoulder blades together at the back, drawing the hands back, pausing at the back, coming forward, I find it can really help develop the bench press. But the same thing can be done with dumbbells. The same thing can be done with dumbbells on a decline, making it a little bit less invasive on the shoulder. The same thing can be done with dumbbells on an incline. Any of these that you feel train the pecs through a much greater range of motion than you can on your press will have some merit. That being said, I do think that in this spot you could also just fit in some incline dumbbell work. If you have the recovery capabilities, you could also fit in some incline barbell work. The reason that incline barbell didn't necessarily make my top three is oftentimes, especially if we're training it with a moderate width grip, I find that people are not limited by the strength of their pecs as much so as maybe their shoulders, their technique and bar path, or their triceps. And you know, if you're rarely limited by the muscle that we're trying to train, it might not be the best selected exercise for that specific goal. The last thing I'm going to mention that I forgot to mention earlier, that is, if targeting the chest, developing strength in the chest is your goal, I highly recommend training your bench presses with a pause. Even if you're not a competitive powerlifter, pausing in that most difficult position is a very good way to develop strength. I think that the moment I started regularly pausing my training reps long ago when I first started training, I remember my chest was instantly sore. My pecs blew up, and I just developed a level of strength around the chest that I had never been able to build up training touch and go. If that doesn't feel great to you and you insist on training touch and go, then you're really going to want to make sure that you're having a high degree of control and not bouncing the bar if we really want to maximize the strength development of our chest. I hope you guys like this video. If you do, I'll probably make similar videos and plan them out a little bit better for other body parts, what I would pick as my key motions for strengthening those muscle groups. Let me know if there's any other videos you guys want me to do. And then finally, if you guys have any questions you would like my opinion on that don't necessarily warrant an entire video, go back to my questions video from a few posts ago and leave me a question. And once we get to enough questions on that one, I will be putting up the next one.